Let me begin by making a confession, and that is this. I am an incurable optimist, and therefore I don't share the pessimistic view that there's everything wrong with us. Of course, we must identify what's wrong with us, because unless we are conscious of our deficiencies, there won't be any attempt to improve. So that should be only for this purpose. And let me share with you something which many of you, of course, at least would know, democratic constitution, by saying that the people of India have taken the constitution of India as the Dharma Shastra. And Dharma is not religion, it is righteousness. Now that is the sum and substance, you see what he says. Let me, in this context, once we are clear about that, because very often, well, I'm not very impressed when I hear a debate that it is human agency which is going to work it. And therefore it is the worth of the individuals who are the personnel to work, the institutions, who are going to determine. Alexander Pope had said long back, you see, for forms of government let fools contest. That which governs best is the best. Now, is there really anything wrong with our constitution? Personally, as a student of the Constitution for more than half a century, having started that study as a law student long back, you see, as General Saigal said, others have also spoken, well, those who framed the Constitution were great visionaries. Now, if you see, what are the two core values which they emphasize on? The two core values which they mention in the preamble of the Constitution. The preamble begins with the words, "We the people of India." Now, which means the political sovereignty rests in the people. Which also means that ultimately the accountability is to the people of India. And the two core values they say, that is justice, liberty, equality, etc., assuring the dignity of the individual and unity and integrity of the nation. Mr. Arif Muhammad spoke of that individual dignity which we are not very often aware of. Now, that is one of the core values. I'm also at a loss when I hear a lot of it being debated in the context of many things which are happening wrong these days. As if national security and individual dignity are two alien concepts. They are not. They are not. The only thing is, no sensible person would say that individual dignity or liberty cannot be subordinated when it is in conflict with the national security. But they are not incompatible concepts. Now, this kind of constitution, which focuses on, mentions these two as the core values. And if you see the directive principles of the state policy, which are the principles fundamental in governance, and compare them with the opening address of Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the vision of free India at the commencement of the Constitution of India. That you will find, for those of you who are interested, quoted in Dr. Subhash Kashyap's Constitutional Law, which is a recent publication, in the beginning also. You will find all that encapsulated in the directive principles, which are principles fundamental in governance. Now, that together with these core values is the vision of free India. So what we have to see, that is the promise. What are we practicing? So I had occasion to contribute a chapter in one of the books which will be published shortly. You see, Constitution, the promise, practice and prospect. Well, personally I feel the prospect is certainly very bright, provided we ensure one thing. And what is that? You see, Rajendra Prasad, in the concluding session of the Constituent Assembly, had said we have produced a constitution on that effort, etc., etc. But its worth will depend on the worth of the people who work it. But just as a machine is a lifeless thing, and it gets life only when the machine man works it, and the worth of the machine man, you see, decides what is the worth of that machine. Similarly, those who are going to work the Constitution, if they are worthy men, the Constitution will fulfill its promise. I think that's where we need to focus to revitalize Indian democracy. If there is anything wrong, it is because of the devaluation or degeneration of many of the national institutions. I'd like to repeat something which I've said very often. Now, you see, there are 7 principles or standards in public life which Lord Nolan Committee in UK, in a similar situation, enumerated. I consider 3 of them best, of course, are to be transparency, accountability, and leadership. Of course, the rest are honesty, etc., which have to be taken for granted. Now, transparency is required for the people to be able to discharge their participatory role in governance. That is what is true democracy. And the democracy has to be inclusive democracy, not the rule of the majority, which means every section of society must have a say and must be involved in policy making as well as its implementation. So the question of this majority, minority, automatically that issue gets dissolved. Every section of the society must have the requisite significance in the participatory form of governance. Now, for that you need transparency, which means all information which is needed for making an informed choice. And why is that necessary? It is necessary so that the accountability of public men, you see, can be enforced. Accountability of public men can, if that is done, then even if the wrong people get elected, as happens very often, as someone very rightly said, well, that accountability mechanism will ensure that if they are there as representatives, they have to function as true representatives, otherwise they will be accountable. If wrong people are continuing and not being accountable, well, that's something which we need to take care of. Actually, Amartya Sen more recently in his book, The Idea of Justice, has echoed the words of Dr. Rajendra Prasad. What he said is, in a democracy, having merely institutional virtuosity is not enough. What is needed is also the virtuosity of its personnel. Now, do we have that? I think that is one question to be taken care of. Now, apart from transparency and accountability, the last one in that sum is leadership. And I have always felt, if only you have the correct man at the top, everything will fall in place. You see, the top man's presence, what kind of person he is. And therefore one must be the people must be, they must exercise eternal vigilance to see that the top man is the correct kind, and his accountability ought to be ensured. Once we do that, I think that will take care of most of the things. Now, you see, these are, someone said very rightly, I think it was Arif Bhai or maybe someone else, see, about the, you see, I don't want to use a hard word, you see, the combination of the politician and the bureaucrat. Well, I think they are not the only 2 ones. Now some others are also combining. You see. So, but you see, whatever be the combination, I remember some years back, you see, by mistake I was invited by, a batch of senior bureaucrats. They were having a get-together, so they invited me to inaugurate that. I said, please don't call me, I'm a very difficult man. They said, we want you for that, so I said, hi with them. Now, incidentally, what happened when I went there, I found on my either side, you see, they were both bureaucrats. One of them had become minister in the meantime, after resigning from that. So I said, the day you, that is, the bureaucrats, stop bending your brains to the other side, half the things or more than half will be all right. Because everyone is not like the gentleman on the left who has had the experience of being a senior bureaucrat before becoming a politician. You see, most of them are like the gentleman on the other side. But now they are not the only ones, as I said. Now you find that, you see, that support coming from everyone else. Now one of the things which is being said today for quite some time, that earlier corporate interest was taken care of through proxy. Now they say, why trust someone else? Why don't I go myself? So you see, it's not correct to blame or identify a particular group. There are good people, best of people everywhere, and there are the worst of people also everywhere. There is no branch which is free from it. And let me tell you, and I have no hesitation in saying, I've said it very often, some of the finest bureaucrats and persons drawn from other walks of life. I have had the privilege of meeting after I limited office. That's what I've been telling my colleagues. So let us not condemn any particular lot. Let us, you see, ensure that we exercise. See, what is the dangerous trend of late, which I find is, what everyone must be seeing, the lack of performance of their legal and constitutional obligations by most of the public functionaries is leading the aware civil society see, is leading the so-called, you see, people from the civil society, self-proclaimed leaders, to resort to undemocratic methods and also extra-legal methods. Now, that's a very dangerous trend. But that only goes to show that we have a vibrant civil society, but its energy must be diverted or channelized in the right direction. That is where every one of us is. The problem with us is that, you see, we, as Rahman said, we Indians are too talkative. We keep talking, but the action is wanting. So what is needed is to channelize our action. I think the title of the book, Revitalizing Indian Democracy. Indian democracy is there to stay. Secularism is safe. I remember having said to Human Rights at that time in 2002, when I went to Geneva after that Gujarat thing. I said to her, I have no doubt India will always remain secular, but I said it's not an emotional statement. It is a statement based on reason. And what is the reason? I said, well, communal rights takes place, communal violence takes place, but we see every time some such aberration happens, a lot of people from the majority community come forward to condemn it, and that is the safeguard. If the minorities are left to protect themselves, naturally they are less in number. And you see, that won't matter. So that is the reason. So we have that cultural ethos. I would end by saying only this: if each one of us performs our fundamental duty, the very first fundamental duty in Article 51A, Part 4A of the Constitution, is to abide by the Constitution. The Constitution tells us everything which we need to know. The second one says, you see, our rich composite culture, the rich heritage of our composite culture. What is our composite culture? I said before we came here, I was talking to Arif Bhai, and I was trying to tell him, I belong to that generation. I was growing up when the partition came, so I remember things like that. I never saw communalism in any form or parochialism at that time so much, but every passing day, even at the highest level, which I have been privileged to be, I have found those aberrations. I think these are the things, more than the letter of the Constitution, which matter. And that if we do, and social sanction will always be far more effective than legal sanction. Let us not, you see, accept anything socially which we, all of us know is correct. Once we do that, when I was growing up, no one talked about an honest man, because honesty was the general rule. People identified and condemn the dishonest. Now today we say, this judge is honest. Every time I hear it, I feel someone has slapped me in the face. That's what we say. And why I say this, 1985 when I was Chief Justice in the Madhya Pradesh High Court, in a meeting when we were considering additional district judges for promotion, then it was, district judge post was a promotion post. There was one gentleman, of course a very honest man, which every judge should be, but he was, I mean, no good. So were the Kolonamai judges. Malik said after some time, everyone thought that he had reached by Peter's principle, the highest post that he would get, no more. So Malik turned to me and said, Chief, why not make him as an honest man? I told him, I said, Malik, do you realize the implication of your statement? I said, we promote a person, a judge, simply because he is honest. You see, have we reached that stage? That was 85. Things are much more.